So Recreators is officially back and continuing the plot with this episode that came out this week. Now, FYI, last week, even though it was titled Episode 13, it was a recap. But the recap, which I didn't review, because if you look, you'll notice there was no review on it. Even though I didn't review it, I want to say right now, if you skip the recap, I want to say right now, stop what you're doing and go watch that. Even if you've already seen episode 14, I really recommend you to go watch the recap, which is episode 13, because that was very meta. Very, very fucking meta. That's all I'm gonna say. That recap was hilarious, unexpectedly good for a recap of all things. It's just like, if you have yet to see that, I recommend go watch it. So, with that being said though, with the new episode, we have a new opening song, a new music, new characters added to the cast, and the main plot that was set up in episode 12 is now fully underway in this episode. So, let's begin. So at the end of the episode, which is the simple thing I want to get out of the way first before I get into what the meat of this episode is about, at the end, a new character is introduced to part of the cast, and this character is a shoujo girl, like legit a shoujo girl, like a main female character from a shoujo romance series, like a slice of life, romance, school life, manga or anime series, because when she popped up at the end of the episode, she's like, you know, I don't know where I'm at, I'm like all confused, and you just see her design and all that, the way her entire, you know, attire is, you just know she is that typical schoolgirl that's in a romance slice of life series, and I'm like, how the fuck is she gonna be useful? Like, when you really think about it in the grand scheme of things, how is a regular schoolgirl that is from a shoujo romance series going to even be able to compare or compete with all these other characters? I mean, we already knew that Recreators was kind of unbalanced when it came to some characters coming into our world. I mean, that was a given. When you have a bunch of different series, like joining forces into one series, there's obviously going to be some form of unbalanced, you know, characters. I mean, it's kind of like this. It's like Fate Stay Night. It's like throwing Gilgamesh up against, you know, like a regular assassin. That's basically how you can look at this, because they're just unbalanced, and certain heroes or legends are unbalanced, and when you look at this, it's also true. So, the girl being introduced, I'm like, what role is she gonna play? Is she gonna be like some form of cheerleader or something? Or is she gonna be like the group's moral compass? I'm just very curious on what role this character is gonna play. For her to be introduced in the second half, at the beginning of the second half, it's obvious that she's gonna be important, but just the question is, for what? Now, one of the things I do want to discuss, though, is the fact that this episode was very serious, and it really surprised me, because it felt like the writers of this episode, since this is anime original, it felt like the writers of this episode was actually speaking truthfully about how they feel about what they write. It felt like the writers were actually writing us a message instead of me just watching an anime episode. And hear me out, this is why I think that. In the episode, you have it to where a couple of the authors, you know, our main characters, they're trying to figure out what they need to do. When all the worlds are colliding, for instance, their character's gonna be one series, it's a big project. It's like making a story that's already happening into the real world and their world and all that. It's just very confusing and all that. But basically, the story they're working on, the main plot or point right now that was set up in episode 12, they were trying to figure out how they can make this believable, because it's very real when you think about it. Let's just take for an example, okay, let's just say for some reason, okay, I'm trying to use some very extreme examples. Okay, let's say Berserk, okay? You know how much I love Berserk. Let's say Berserk, and you know how much I kind of despise this series, Fairy Tail, were to combine and go into the same world. Now, yes, I know that's disgusting. That's disgusting saying Berserk and Fairy Tail in the same exact sentence and saying they're going to join in the same world, but that's kind of what they're talking about. It's like saying two series that never should have been together in the first place are coming together. How would the audience be able to accept this? And that's the big thing. When the audience looks at something like that, okay, let's just say this was real life, okay? What Recreators is doing, this is real life, what they're trying to do. Let's say Berserk, Fairy Tail was a part of it. Let's say Hunter x Hunter was a part of it, Naruto, One Piece, let's think of a shoujo Horimiya, you know, just some series out there, some crazy series that honestly should never have, you know, been together or somehow together. Many of the fans of those certain series obviously haven't read all of those other series it's combining with, but they'll probably not want to accept that. They'll think it's cool, but they're like, what the fuck, how's this gonna make sense? Like, how is, you know, Berserk Guts from Berserk supposed to fit in with, like, Nakama power-ups from Fairy Tail, or how is fucking, you know, the overall power scaling of the Naruto universe supposed to scale with, you know, Fairy Tail's universe? How's that gonna work? Or One Piece? There's just gonna be many things like that, and so when you throw all these series together, the audience, which that's the main point of why they're writing this, they need the audience acceptance. They need the audience to acknowledge this and make it actually become true. If the audience doesn't accept it, it won't happen. And that's why they're at a very critical point right now. Why the authors were talking about what they're writing. It needs to be very good. And it felt very real. It felt like the writers of Recreators was actually talking to all of us that was watching this series about how it is to make, like, you know, some form of crossovers. When there's crossovers and all that, it would just be very hard to do. And I really felt like the entire scene when the different people, part of the editors, and all of those people that were trying to join forces to make this series happen in the first place, when the government called them in, I felt like that was also a nod to what Recreators was trying to do in the first place. Now, I could be wrong here, so do not quote me on this, okay? So don't quote me on this. I could be wrong, but if I am correct, I have heard this from somewhere. I don't know the exact place I've heard it. It may have been on Twitter, maybe in the comments or somewhere else, but basically, though, from what I remember being said, is that apparently when Recreators was in production, they actually wanted to bring in other series. For instance, let's say Fate Stay Night, you know, or Madoka Magica. They wanted to bring these series in and use their characters in Recreators, but there would have been a lot of technical issues, legal issues, obviously, so they weren't able to do that at all. And I felt like the way this episode was kind of orientated, it was kind of more of a nod towards that. If that would have actually have happened, that would have been really fucking cool, but also I felt like it was also another shout out to how hard it could be to have crossovers in the first place, and why sometimes it wouldn't even make sense, and why authors or publishing companies or whatever wouldn't want to do this in the first place, is because it wouldn't make any fucking sense. It would actually ruin the credibility of these series. Like I said, imagine if Berserk's world merged with Fairy Tail's world. That'd be like a clusterfuck. You'd be like, what the fuck is this shit? So yeah, I felt like that was really interesting, how it felt so real when they were discussing that, and how they needed to make it believable, a good story, and also how writers, they take pride in their work. Now, not all writers take pride in their work, obviously, but a lot of writers do. When they're writing something, they put their passion, and they put everything they have into their writing, and if they were to make a crossover, that, in a way, it could trample on what their series is about. It's like their worldviews. It's, like I said, I know I keep using this example, but it's the easiest example. It's like mixing Berserk's worldview of how cruel it is, fucked up, and real, with the Fairy Tail viewpoint. And that is the big argument of this episode. You have this series that's more catered towards teens, or, you know, young adults, while you have it to where the one series is catered towards, like, young adults and major, like, adults and old age. That is kind of the big point here, and I like how the series does that. It's just so unique and so cool the way Recreators does this type of stuff. It always breaks the meta. It always shows you that, like, holy shit, it's being truthful, and this is actually what happens, or what would happen if stuff like this did happen in real life. So just cool. It's just super cool to see how Recreators is being made. Now, one of the big things, though, about this episode I do truly like is how Sota is finally taking the initiative to be a part of the cast. Now, we know he went through some development the past couple episodes, which, like I said, I'm no longer going to talk shit about Sota anymore, because after seeing his development, seeing what he went through and what he's still currently trying to overcome, I understand that. I don't completely understand, because I've never been in that exact same situation, but I can understand why he would withhold information so much, and why he would become like a background character, even though he was the main character of the story. Now I understand, so I'm not really going to talk shit about him anymore, and I'm glad he's actually taking the initiative to actually be a part of the cast. He's making his own character, he's going to be helping out the characters in this new series. It's just very fascinating. It's really cool to see something like that, so I'm glad Sota is being more involved in the series instead of just staying in the background, and also I'm really enjoying just how this project is coming along. It's just very unique, and it's just like such a weird thing to do, because what the series is about, and then what's going on in the series, and where they came from, it's just so weird, but cool. So, yeah. Overall, the latest episode, enjoyable, can't wait to see what happens next. Tell me your thoughts, what do you think the Shoujo Girl is gonna do? Please be safe, love you all so much, Chibi out.